Yeah, I got this at a thrift store.
Nice.
Hi there. Happy New Year to everybody. And this is the new streamingnetwork.com, WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network, radio, TV, and podcast, #1 internet singles talk network. And this is Let's Talk Dating with Christine and Barry. Hi, Barry.
Hi, Christine. Happy holidays. Happy New Year.
I know. It's very exciting to be talking to you at the New Year. Did you have an enjoyable New Year's?
Peaceful, which was good.
Peaceful's good. Can you see me? I feel a little dark.
Yeah, I think you got a lot more light behind you, but we'll be okay.
Okay. I could turn around. You think if that would be helpful?
Yeah, I think we'll be fine.
Okay.
Unless you really want to.
So today we're talking about what to do when someone pushes your buttons.
Mm-hmm.
I guess we have to decide what buttons those are, huh?
Well, it's also about knowing what your buttons are as well, not just which ones, but in fact you got some. Because
yeah,
some people think that some people think they're immune, you know.
So certainly coming out of all this family stuff, I think a lot of people might have had their buttons pushed, and that could be a good way to find out what kind of buttons you have and how they might get pushed with a personal relationship if it happened with your family.
Oh, yeah.
So button pushing. The best way I have found for me to understand that somebody's pushed my button is I have a big reaction. Sometimes it could be a happy reaction, but I think in this instance, we're talking about lots of negative reactions that people could have, that you feel dismissed, or you feel misunderstood, or you feel criticized, or you feel that somebody completely doesn't understand what you said and you go off the deep end. How do you react when somebody pushes your buttons, Barry?
Well, thankfully, I've done a lot of work, so my buttons aren't as easily pushable as they used to be. However, what I've noticed, and this is actually the skill set I've been developing for a long time to help my clients with, is I wouldn't say I bite my tongue, but I pause because the temptation to react and jump back out is instinctual. But I'm getting better at more of the time of just simply going, let me just stop for a second and just consider, because 9 times out of 10, there's nothing to do because I realize it's just their ego trying to do something, and I don't have to worry about any of it. But 10% of the time, there's going to be something I need to respond to. And the key thing is I don't respond versus react, which is the big difference. I mean, talk about that in the conversation, because it's one of the things I think is an indication that we're getting buttons pushed is when we're in judgment about other people. Because what's happening is we think we're okay and it's their fault or there's something wrong with them. So we judge what they're doing and what they're saying or how they're being to justify us being superior, which is not really a true thing, but it's what we play as a game. So we avoid thinking our buttons are pushed by saying, oh, I'm fine. It's all them, versus do something about it. So yeah, we have a bit to unpack in this episode.
Yeah. And I do think the direction that you're talking about is that we feel threatened. We feel threatened by something that somebody has said about us or to us, or in response to something we've said that makes us think they are thinking they're superior, or that we're inferior, or something that we've said is stupid or uneducated. And really, as you said, when you've done your work, you can sort of waylay it. I know I've sure done a lot of work, and there's times when my buttons are still pushed, especially as I know my Achilles heel is not enough food or not enough sleep, and the deadly combination if I have both.
Mm-hmm.
So what I need to really watch for is when I'm having a really big reaction, to see if I can stop for even a second to say, what do I think is really going on? And what do I think is really happening? And what's happening for me and what's happening with them? And then the next phase certainly is to check it out. But to first just be aware when you're having upset, you're frustrated, you're angry, you're sad, you're having this huge surge. And for me, when that happens really big, I have trouble even being logical. My logical thoughts just go out the window, and the logical coachy person who was there a minute ago seems to have left town. Really very much. And then I go, oh gosh, I should be having this logical thought about that. But the person available to me to have that logical thought has just left town. So partly sometimes I just take a break. I go to the bathroom, or I go stand outside, or I take a couple deep breaths, because I can't even get to the place of, well, what just happened and what could I ever do about it, until I've done some sort of a thing to short circuit the erupting and the thing that's going to take off in a whole, probably not very helpful direction.
Yeah, in fact, what you said there was a key part, and I want to speak on this point for a minute, because I've always said the first thing for anybody in this situation is self-awareness. Because someone pushing your buttons and you're reacting, you're not even aware you're doing it. It's so almost automatic or unconscious, and especially with family, because that pattern's been there for decades. So the way you react is not something you even think about, because you just, like, you just respond, or you shut down, or whatever way you do interact with that behavior is automatic. So to become self-aware, to become enough of a self-conscious, as in conscious of self, not nervous, but conscious of self perspective. So you go, well, hang on a second. Is that real? Is it true? Is it need to be responded to? Because a lot, like I said earlier, 90% of people, 90% of stuff coming at you is other people's crap. It's their judgment. It's their ego. It's their stuff. And to quote Roosevelt, what you think of me is none of my business. It's that kind of idea. Is that, and also, from Don Miguel Ruiz from Four Agreements, don't take things personally. The reality is, most time people are getting upset with things. It's their agenda, it's their belief, it's their rules, and honestly has nothing to do with you. But they're throwing out hooks to get you pulled into what they're thinking, so they get a rise out of you. And so they want to feel better by making you upset. And when you recognize that the power you have to not be upset upsets them even more, it's almost like there's a certain zealousness or a certain zeal, joy and zeal you can have to be in that way. I'm not saying you should do that, but this is one of the journeys, is you become more aware. You start saying, you know what, I'm not going to react to see what they do about it. Then you become better at being non-reactive, and you become more responsive. And you go, you know what, I'm just not going to play in this game. I'll step out of the game, so to speak, which is what you said about when your wise part departs. It's like the self-awareness is a way of getting your wise part back again.
Oh, two egos clashing into each other is really bad.
Yeah, indeed.
And so when I figured out, one of the most high value things to me is to feel understood. And that when I feel misunderstood, that is definitely one of my biggest buttons. Even if I've had food and sleep, I can have a reaction, at least. That's a button that's pushed in me. And so what I've learned about that is, as you just said, how important is it to me, to this particular person, to really truly understand me? Could they? Are they available to? Do I really want to spend the time and energy on that? And boy, that was a big learning curve for me, because I used to think, when I was way younger, it was important that everybody understood. And there's some people that just won't ever, for a whole bunch of reasons that really aren't important to me, but I thought all of it was important to me. And so figuring out how really important is it to me for this person to truly understand me, and am I going to spend the time and energy, if we have misunderstood each other, to get to a more mutual understanding place. So when I learned that that was a really high button for me, then to do the layers of, well, is this really valuable to figure out how to do that with this person? Oh, yes, it's very valuable for me to figure out how to do this, and then figure out the people that I needed to do it with.
It is a layering process and a level process. And that's the thing. As I said, self-awareness is the first step. Not the only step, but it's the first step. And so the thing, and in the work I do with myself, is also recognizing this, as I go through my own journey in terms of my own transformation and ownership of my own stuff, was to realize that my buttons are my business, meaning that those buttons that get pushed are for me to work on. Not saying that I should protect them and let them be there all the time, but oftentimes those buttons we have inside are from, and we talk about this many times in the show, reflections on childhood, things we did when we were very young, that we fell in the trap of being at the mercy of the bigger kids, our parents, our relatives, whoever it was, that basically used us as their, I was going to say pincushion, but to basically be the person that they take out their stuff on. And so we may carry those wounds up into adulthood. And so becoming aware, whether it is in the situation or if you do it with someone outside that, to recognize those patterns that are running, those buttons that you keep in trigger happy response, are really things that you can work on yourself so they don't become that way anymore. Some things I had to work on myself because I shared before on the show, I was bullied in high school. So I had this sense of like danger all the time. And it took me a while to do this, but I had to work on really understanding that, first of all, I know, and I do know intellectually, but to know emotionally and energetically that the world is safe most of the time. But also to use that skill, and we talked about this before on the show before as well, that discernment, that awareness, that radar I had running back then can be a useful tool, not in danger, but awareness. And so I noticed things maybe more expediently than other people do because of that journey I've had. So in some ways, those buttons became gifts along the way. So when you can take dominion over those buttons that are pushed upon, especially when you're not having them pushed upon, so you can do something ahead of time, it can be very empowering and very freeing.
So certainly reflecting on, if you look back over the holidays, if any of this happened, what things just got your goat, as my grandmother used to say, what things set you off, what things really made you mad or sad that you had a big reaction to. And then now reflect on them and say, why did that happen? And what part of my life previously is the thing that poked at? Maybe it was that person forever that poked at it. That's a possibility too. Or somebody that reminded you of them. To look at this reaction probably has a lot to do with previous reactions and things that have happened in your life. I think that's a really good point. Thanks, Barry.
Absolutely. Well, this is the work. I mean, in my master's degree, that was one thing we decided a lot was some of these was healing of memories. And it really is that, because the memories are inside of us. They may be historical, but they have no impact upon on who we are, except the memories we carry inside. And so when we can heal those memories and make peace with them, we can be free of those buttons altogether. But it does take work. Yes, not just an easy fix. And it does take awareness again to be aware of the buttons in the first place. So yeah, this is a gift that keeps on giving when you do the work.
Yes. One of the other things I think that sets a lot of people off is that you need to be right all the time. And that if somebody points out that you're not right, that you might be not right or maybe even wrong, and that you're ready to fight to the death that you're right. And even if you are right, how important is it that the other person think that you're right too? Because I think that's what pushes our buttons. It's not just that this person has said that you're wrong. It's that you care that this person believe that you're right. And I think that's the layer that a lot of people don't pay attention to, because you could say, in my world, this is really right. And if you're getting upset with the other person saying that it's not right, it's because you really are caring a lot about what they say and how they feel, period, and certainly how they feel about you. And there's the layers. That's the work.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, there is another layer of deciding, are you really right? It might be they have more information that you didn't know, and there is less right about what you were thinking and more right about what they're thinking. But if your buttons are getting pushed, which is the subject of this, you're not thinking logically like that, and you're just, gosh darn it, they're wrong and I'm right, and I'm going to just not even give an inch and go straight to this huge emotion about it. And it's generally not very fruitful. Neither person end up listening to the other person, even if there was some valid point from one or both sides. Neither side is going to ever hear what the other person had to say, which might have been helpful. Or if anything, it'll just solidify your point more. But if you're just screaming in your head and then the screaming comes out of your mouth, neither person can hear anything that happens from the other side, I think.
It's true. It's true that the thing is, I know in the past I've used it, and it is almost a flippancy in a way to say when someone's arguing with you, and because they want to believe that they're right and I'm wrong, is when I've simply said to them, you're right, because by doing that it's almost a short circuit. But the thing is, it isn't necessarily clean if there's part of me using it as an agenda, because it's like, if it's simply, and that's the thing. I mean, because I was actually with a friend of mine this past week. We had this long conversation. We were talking for quite a while. It's happened a few times with her, where she says something. I say something, and she says something that corrects me, not in a triggering way, but she knows more information than I do. And it's very humbling, frankly, and it's a good thing actually, because it recognizes to me is that it's something for me to learn. So I said something about some situation, and she was like, "No, it's this way," and I'm like, "It is." So I actually went into curiosity, which actually was powerful because it elevated my conversation and expanded my own learning because she gave me information I didn't have. And so one of the gifts of this, if you're willing to be humble, is that when someone does have information that you don't, or thinks, and not just thinks they know more, but they actually do know more, can you be a student to what they're teaching? And yes, if they're upset about it, that's another story, but just that communication, because sometimes if someone tells you something that you don't agree with and you feel like your buttons are being pushed, even if they're being nice about it, you can actually be reactive because you are very attached, like you were saying, to that, like, but I'm right. And you want to defend that at all costs. And the challenge with that, and this is the thing, I mean, the quotes I've used many times and heard from many teachers, like, do you want to be right, or you want to be happy, or you want to be right, or you want to be loving, or you want to be right, whatever that is. Recognizing that it's a choice, that right isn't the only option. And sometimes to get off that high horse, so to speak, can not only be humbling, it can be very freeing. And that's the experience I had with the conversations I was having last week, was such a joyful, first time I had it wasn't. Let me be transparent, because we had the conversation the first time we talked a few weeks ago. I was like kind of attached to, like, but I thought this was true. But the more I started having the conversation, the more I recognized that I had a lot of things that were structurally unsound in my belief systems. And it was okay to see them knocked down, because it gave me room to grow, which is why I was grateful for it. Because growth-oriented mindset isn't something most people carry. So if you have one of those, you're in a good place.
So Barry, you were saying she pushed your buttons initially, it sounds like.
The first time she did, but it was also from the point of view, and again, having done the work, I didn't choose to go back. Well, the recognition was, though, I didn't go back and say, no, I'm right, you're wrong, because that wasn't the thing. It was actually the immediate thing that came up was because I trusted her. It's the other part too. We have trust, which is a good thing. Because if you don't trust them, it's another story, which again, part of the conversation of button pushing is you don't trust the person pushing your buttons. Because I trusted her, and where she was coming from, it got me to stop before I did react and go, but I thought I was right. And so the internal part of me became questioning about myself, not about what she was saying, but it became self-investigating. So again, there's lots of little tools here. One of those things is being really self-aware, but also to have trust within communications. Because you have somebody who you don't trust, who's trying to push your buttons. Why would you let them push your buttons if you don't trust them?
Good point. So I just thought it was fun. I got to point out that she pushed your buttons, and then you went through that whole process and recovered from it so beautifully.
Yeah. Again, lots of years of work to get here. It wasn't like instantaneous.
And I think trust is really an important point that you brought up, because I think we could, as people, can tend to be less reactive if the information is coming from somebody that we trust, that we might go, is there more to this? Is there something that I don't know? The other thing that I wanted to say too is from our lovely mutual mentor, Allison Armstrong. She always says, listen to learn instead of respond. Because I think when we want to just be so responsive in this high energy way, it's often because somebody's pushed our buttons. And not, I wonder why this has happened, and I'm experiencing this, and is there another way to look at this? Is there more information inside of me? Is there more information inside of them? I think I want to learn more. But if we're just
yeah, well, the thing is, a lot of us are carrying around a set of beliefs that we think are our life and our whole structure of what we're about. And if anybody knocks on one of those beliefs, to be honest, most of the time those beliefs are like a house of cards, one up and they fall down. And so that what she was saying is listen to learn is so key, because it puts us in a place where any beliefs we have are malleable and replaceable. So if we have structural beliefs that maybe worked until now, but we get new information that changes our beliefs, that's a good thing, because we're growing. It means we're changing. Because we have beliefs that never change, maybe we're outdated in what we're thinking, and maybe time to update our beliefs. So the gift of that can be such a powerful lesson. I know we're coming up on the break, so we'll summarize it in a moment, and then we'll come back with more afterwards.
So thinking about when you have your buttons pushed, is it that you need more information to confirm what you're thinking? Do you need more information to have a thought about what you're thinking? Or maybe you have more information that changes what you're thinking? That could be a very good exercise when somebody pushes your buttons, right?
Oh, yeah. We'll talk more about that when we come back from the break. So stay tuned.
We'll be right back. I'm back. I went to the light. I can't stand how dark I am.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh, there you go.
here we are, back again. I don't know that it helped much.
Yes.
Okay, we're talking at Let's Talk Dating. Happy New Year, about what to do when someone pushes your buttons.
Mhm.
And so
And
we've talked a lot about what causes us to feel like people are pushing our buttons and how to recognize it, and maybe do a few exercises about having it not be so strict and hard and impactful of your life, because oh my gosh, I think it can derail a lovely conversation, a possible important conversation, a growing conversation, something that could be so beneficial if we just, because pushing buttons mean you're going off the deep end as far as I'm concerned.
yeah, in fact, and so I want to, again, back to what I said at the early beginning, but I want to give it a different spin. Is one of the, because since the title is what to do when someone can push your buttons, but one of the key things I want to say is one of the things to do when someone pushes your buttons is not do anything. Because we said earlier in the conversation about the reactivity and the desire to be right and be attached to being right and everything else. If you don't do anything, because one of the things that I love about this work and working in relationship work is we get to explore what's going on and to get to understand what people are about. So if someone is attempting to push your buttons, maybe you want to get curious about them, what's driving them, what they're about. Now, again, not always easy from the first time it happens, but if you start to detune or disengage the reaction motor inside, because that's one of the things that drives us, you can actually be curious and be interested in what's going on. And what, that's why I love Ted Lasso. It's about be curious. Such a great little teaching he had in there. That in the darts match. If you haven't seen Ted Lasso, the darts match is such a great 5-minute scene. It's on YouTube. Somebody find that clip. But about be curious, because the assumptions we make, and a lot of times button pushing is assumptive. It puts us in a place where we're at disadvantage because we're not learning the truth. We're not staying in facts. We're living in some belief system, which is limiting. So one thing you can do, again, self-awareness being key, is to just stop the autopilot inside and go, what's going on here? What's really happening? What do they really want? And just listen. Because one of the gifts we have as a person in the world is with one mouth and two ears. We can listen twice as much as we talk, perhaps. And in this conversation, being able to listen to what they're saying, maybe even listen between the lines as what they really want, is maybe they want love, maybe they want something else, not just to prove they're right, but they're holding on to something that's really upsetting them. And you don't have to be the one that nails it in even harder,
Yeah, such a good point, because if you're having a big reaction, it's because you probably feel passionate about something, what they said or how you feel about it, or more in depth of that conversation. And it could generally, what I found when you stop and listen to learn and have a more deep wondering about it and curiosity about it, is either it turns into a much better conversation where both people feel like they get more satisfied, or you go, this person has such an agenda and what am I doing with them? Because if we're
So
so
true.
busy reacting, I think we can't even be discerning about, well, this person's just being a jerk. And that's why my
Yeah.
buttons I have a really good reason to have my buttons be pushed, but to have a big thing about them, why? So this
Yeah.
whole exercise, I think, could just be so much more beneficial no matter what the motive is of the other person, whatever the button pushing that's happening with you. If we could get ourselves together enough
Mhm.
to go, whoa, what in the heck is really going on with me and what the heck is going on with them? It could be so productive and learning and deepening in so many ways.
Yeah. Again, the gift of this is such a possibility. And yeah, being the place where you become curious is one option, but like you said, definitely having this self-reflection or introspection to notice inside, because one of the gifts of having your buttons pushed is you discover you've got buttons that can be pushed. And so the possibility now is, do you want to keep those buttons? Or perhaps you want to see, maybe the buttons could be like defused, so to speak, because you may discover that you got a button about something that you're letting being pushed, and you're going, why am I still attached to that position or that reason or that justification? And so sometimes the person who's pushing your buttons is giving you a gift to look at yourself and go, why don't I want to be, that's stupid. That's silly. I don't want to do that anymore. And you can actually start realizing those buttons you don't need them anymore. So part of the gift, and this sounds silly, but part of the gift of somebody pushing your buttons is they're showing you where you haven't, something, resolve something, haven't made peace with something. Now, not say you need it in front of them, but you can. And one of the things I talk about also is about, that they also have the idea about counting to 10, like, because when you get angry, you count to 10 before you say anything, because you need time to regroup and recenter, like you said, and that awareness to say, you know what, I need to take out some time and go for a walk. So if you're in the middle of an argument, especially like after Thanksgiving's another one of those times, we get to with family and all the old buttons show up, so to speak, and all the button bushes show up. So when that happens, to excuse yourself and go for a walk around the block or something else where you disengage for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, even an hour if you need to reset, you might discover when you do the introspection that that thing that got pushed doesn't even belong in there anymore, that you're done with it. And so there can be a gift where you can actually go, and it sounds silly enough, but you can do it, is after you've made peace with that, if you can do it in that short period of time, you may got to the person who did that and said, thank you. You don't know how much you helped me. And they don't know what to do with that. And that's not revenge, it's just awareness.
Sure. I heard somebody say once, how come your parents have a big effect on you? And I said, because they push your buttons because they installed them. So it made
indeed. Yes.
Logical sense to me, since I had one of those. So yeah, I love that. I love looking at it as a gift. It really could be a gift that, gosh, I didn't even know I had that ever, or wow, I didn't know I was still having that, or I didn't know I was still having such a big reaction to that. And then you get to decide, is this still work? As Dr. Phil says, is that working for you? Do you want to change anything about it? Do you need to alter it, or would you like it to just be gone? And you really can't do anything about anything until you're aware of it. So yeah, thank you, whether you do it in person or not, to whoever brings up that button in you that you go, sheesh, I thought I'd already worked on that, or I thought I'd already process that, and now here it is, big as life in front of me still. It's just another layer. That's what you and I talk about, that we deal with the layer and then the next layer and then the next layer. That's just how you work until you're not here anymore. So to go, well, great, I'm glad I know about that now, and I can make decisions about how to process it. So we could talk a little bit more about the ways that we've learned to process ours. So we've talked about breathing, we've talked about walking away, we've talked about looking at your buttons. So I think another way is to, if you have some sort of a quiet practice, do you have a meditation? Do you have a breathing practice? Do you have a way that you do something where you attach, I like going outside and sticking my feet in mud and feeling like I'm attached to Mother Earth, or are you into Father Sky, or something, there's some sort of a practice that you could depend on, stretching or swimming or walking or something that you just know is your go-to thing. Okay, there's my button. I need a break. What's your go-to? Because if you figured it out ahead of time, because you're having this hot moment, it's hard to figure out what is it that's going to calm me down. Or if you come up with something that's already a regular go-to thing, or a person that you now go do that thing to help take the hotness away, to bring the pressure down. Because I know when somebody pushes my button, it feels like pressure inside of me, and I need to figure out a way to take the pressure down, because we've made all these great suggestions of this logical way you can think about it afterwards, but you have to get to that logical place. And I think figuring out what your pressure lowering is.
Yeah, that preparatory experience or skill set to really develop like 5-10 different things, especially if you know you're going home for Thanksgiving. Where can you go that you know about? It's like, I know that I've got that place to go to and that place to go to. So you see, like, mental notes of what resource you have. So if and when that happens, the button pushing happens, you know where you can take yourself, or something you can do for yourself that gives you respite for a moment to do something different than the normal reaction. And that's a powerful teaching, because we so often, unfortunately, live life in reactivity to everything. In fact, I know some people I've talked to over the years, and some people I know have spent the whole life in reaction to what's around them, and they're like a ping pong ball being pushed around by the world, and that's not fun. And part of it, yes, responsibility is that big heavy word about taking responsibility for ourselves. But really, if you break down what responsibility is the ability to respond. And so when we recognize the responsibility is simply the fact that we don't have to be reactive and jumping back and arguing or running away from everything, but it's about we can make a choice and have ownership of our own response. It's actually a powerful skill to have. And so this pre-planning, so to speak, like you're saying, to have a list of resources, place you can do things, is so supportive of ourselves and such a great gift to give ourselves. So frankly, I would recommend doing that in your daily life. So, you know, if you know things can happen at work, what, you know, is there another room you go to, or outside, or go outside and pretend you can have a smoke if you don't smoke, you know, do something, change your environment so you can reset and have a think about what you really want to do in response. Because again, taking the time to think gives you more freedom than just being the receiving end of the battering ram if somebody's upset.
And it's fun to run it by, if you have a trusted friend or a coach or a therapist, to say, wow, I really discovered I had all these hot buttons over the holiday, and I really need to come up with some plans, and to brainstorm with somebody. You know, if you have a friend, you can say, well, what do you do to calm down? And they could come up with something you've not even heard of. And you could come up with something they haven't heard of, and you could exchange ideas. Or be the person that you call and go, okay, I have to yell for 10 minutes because I just had this thing with my whoever. I mean, you really, that could be too. I mean, you could have a partner that's your sponsor for when you have somebody who's pushed your buttons.
An anger
So
sponsor.
that, I think an anger sponsor might be a really good thing for lots of people. So but that way you have had a conversation about it. Because I think the other thing too is, at least for me, there were lots of times I got very embarrassed about it and I didn't want to tell anybody. And when I finally told people, they were like, well, gosh, I feel that same way. You know, I think that's the other thing about us sponsors. They go, yeah, this is pretty normal, and yet it feels awful. And what are we going to do about it? But I think just saying it out loud, sometimes you're like, oh, it isn't that huge and horrible. And okay, I do have something I could do. And also just saying it out loud, I think for me, for sure, takes the pressure down. So it might be that you know, go in a room and talk about it in the mirror, scream in a pillow, or call a friend, because having a plan ahead of time and then having a way to implement it. So you might have like 3 things. If you can't go to do that thing because of where you are, you have these other 2 backup things.
Right.
To then be able to get in a place where you could have a more logical discussion, first with yourself and then with whoever it is that's pushing your buttons.
Absolutely. That's such a gift and such a reminder. There's this whole process, the whole journey is part of life. I mean, and to speak to the understanding that, you know, button pushing is not unique to you. If you're someone who thinks you're the only one who has to deal with this, no, you don't. In fact, it's quite possible a person who's pushing your buttons has their own buttons that are getting pushed as well. In fact, sometimes the button pushing is a downward sequence from somebody else who pushed someone else's buttons, who pushed somebody else's buttons, and then end up with you. So to recognize that the button pushing isn't, you're not unique. It isn't personal most of the time, even though it might sound personal because they've got access to your buttons, because buttons usually aren't public. They're usually private. So it's the people who know you can push your buttons more easily than strangers do. So recognizing that it's something that, first of all, is a group experience in some ways, can also give you a sense of being less accountable to the whole thing, less judged by and pressured by what's happening. And so the button pushing, as much as it happens, can be a reminder that it's not something you need to suffer from. That's what we end up doing. We suffer when people push your buttons. We end up in some sort of suffering and pain, upset, wounding, whatever there is, and then we become reactive and we lash out, which isn't helpful either. So this whole conversation is really teaching how to learn to disengage from the button pushing, so you can be more responsive and also more self-caring, so you don't diminish the conversation even further.
So if you think of the experience, as we've been talking about, that the button pushing frequently is this downward spiral for everybody.
Yeah.
Generally, everybody feels worse afterwards.
Yeah.
When everybody's been pushing each other's buttons over and over and over and over, it just gets worse. Where if one person at least, and both people would be best, had some reflecting, some time out, came back, said, geez, you know, that really hurt my feelings. Did you mean it that way? Or gosh, did you really think I was completely wrong? Give me some more information about it. You automatically start the spiral back up again. And at least you could hopefully feel better. And maybe the other person feels better. And then collectively, the relationship, if it's somebody, because generally it's because you're having a relationship. I mean, it could be somebody that yelled at you in a store or yelled at you in your car. And then you have a whole personal thing that you're doing. But generally, this is happening between 2 or more people, that it could just feel better between the 2 people if you could stop and reflect, even if just one person. And if you walk away, then There's no way they can keep doing it if you're walked away and then you're coming back in a more reasonable place. And then you can say, I'm in my head, I'm making the motion of me going back up a spiral, and I'm going to feel better at the end of this. I'm just going to work out how to feel better.
Yeah, the healing opportunity, and this is not true with everybody for sure. And like saying somebody yells at you in the car or in the market, frankly, when that ever happens, I'm usually more amused than upset, because I recognize that they're upset nothing to do with me, because I'm immune. I'm what's what I'm looking for? I'm unknown to them. Like I'm just some stranger. So there's nothing personal about it. So they're upset if it's triggering my buttons. That's a general button I've been carrying for ages, and thankfully they told me there's a button I need to heal. But usually, I say I'm amused by it because I recognize there's something they didn't get the way they wanted. They're upset about, and they're lashing out. But when it comes to something like family, because that's where it really happens, the button pushing happens. I've had experiences with friends, particularly, where it even started sometimes with button pushing because we just get to know each other, and there was some definite like friction between us, and so it felt like there was button pushing. And when and sometimes it was me, sometimes it was them, who said, "Hang on a second, this isn't working. Let's talk and clear things up." Our friendship got tighter and cleaner, and actually a lot happier because of it. So it did spiral up, so to speak. And so the gift of this, especially with people you're close to, because button pushing sometimes is with the close ones, is that the button pushing doesn't have to drive you apart. It actually can bring you together if you're willing to do the work. And that's a powerful shift.
So that's the carrot we dangle out there, that if you're willing to do this work, really, this whole process that we've talked about, that, wow, you acknowledge somebody's pushing your buttons. Wow, it really is uncomfortable. And oh my gosh, what could I personally do about it so that I feel better and that maybe our relationship could get better? I mean, that is the ultimate goal. That's when things get really juicy and wonderful in relationships, that if you both can feel heard and seen and understood, even if you end up still disagreeing, at least you've had an opening to say, well, yeah, I really do believe this differently, and I believe this differently, but wow, I can really see your point, and I can see why that fits you, and I can see why that doesn't fit you, and this fits you. I have a few friends like that, and it's very powerful. And then we generally don't push each other's buttons after that, because we know this is where you stand, and I'm not going to give you a hard time about it, and I'm not going to try to talk you out of it, and I respect where you are, and we have all these other things we can talk about. But we saw, especially with the elections, that it just drove families apart and friendships apart, because they couldn't get to the place where they go, I don't agree, and it isn't right for me, but I sure can see why you do. And that I can see why you do went out the window for lots of people.
Yeah. And you start recognizing also the relationship and the love is more important than all the stuff we throw up in front of each other. We start settling into a much healthier place with each other, because that's the other part too, is that oftentimes these button pushings are like these little microscopic dots that can create major rifts between people that don't belong there. It doesn't belong there. So do I have again, back to awareness that button pushing is a minor irritation. It's the pea under the mattress, so to speak, just pulling in old stories right there. But the idea basically being that it's such a minor thing, yet we let it bother us, and that becomes the focus. If you imagine a pea versus a mattress, the mattress is much bigger than that little pea, but we make that one vegetable the focal point, so it becomes all-consuming of everything else. And we recognize that the positive, which is the rest of it, the mattress, is there to support us. We have such a different perspective, and we can shift out of the look at this button versus look at what we have. And in friendship, especially if there's a button in the middle of the friendship, you want to make the button more important than the friendship you have? I hope not.
Wow, that is such a very good perspective to say, is this one thing? Could be, most of the time not. The thing that you're willing to die on, that the friendship has to die for this one thing. And why? Why is it so huge? Now, when we talk about dating, we've seen things where there's a whole bunch of great things, and there's a couple of things in the can't have, and you're like, it can't make up. Okay. And that's not pushing a button. But you see, when that can happen, when you're in a relationship with someone and their opinion's important, and there's this huge disagreeing point where that can just cancel it out in such a bad way, where you don't go, yeah, this isn't working. It's like that you're not working. That's what the button pushing is. It's you're wrong. There's something wrong with you. Both people are going, there's wrong with you. Yeah, nothing good happens with that. Nothing.
No, and the thing about in that relationship, when you've gone past the dating point into a relationship, is a lot of times when the true self starts to get revealed, because we tend to put on personas when we're dating, and we don't really show our true selves till we're in a relationship. And sometimes when stuff gets revealed, it's like, oh, is that what I was dating? That's not what I want. So, not saying you should get over everything, because some things should be clear enough you don't want to be around, you want to walk away from. At the same time, some of those little peas in the mattress are such a small thing that when you recognize it is only a small thing, you can get by it and then you have a much better relationship. So we're not saying one way or the other is the right way. You find the one true for you. Go from there.
Yeah. We're so going to promote that book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. And that's the thing when I've asked people that have been married for a really long time, they really start learning what the small stuff really is and what the big stuff really is, and what needs to have a big discussion and what's fine. It's just not that big of a thing.
Exactly.
But some of those small things really did start out as buttons, and then you needed to talk about it, and with yourself and with your partner, or maybe with a third party, to really evaluate. Because when you're too close, at least when I was too close to my buttons, I couldn't see them realistically. I really needed somebody to help me look at them in a more realistic way.
Yeah, most buttons, frankly, are pretty invisible to the person. They may be visible to everybody else, but they're invisible to the person until they become self-aware, or they get someone to help point them out to them. And that's the other thing. When someone's pushing your buttons, they're not looking to help you find your buttons. When you're working with a coach, counselor, guide, facilitator, trusted friend, they're looking after you. They want you to see your buttons so you can make a decision about what to do with them. And that's really the best way to get through this.
And don't we have those kinds of conversations all the time with our clients? It's one of my favorite conversations to have, where they go, okay, I'm going to tell you something. And they go, oh yeah, other people have said that and I didn't really understand it. And now I understand it better that you said it. And I think I might work on it. And then they come back and they go, I've been working on it. And how's it going? Oh my gosh, things are smoother now for them as well as the people around them. Yeah, having somebody be an objective third party that cares about you, but not in the family relationship way, has your back. It's invaluable. I mean, we've both had such teachers and mentors in our lives that we've trusted for this. And I think that's how one of the main reasons we've become those kind of people, because we've had such good teachers.
Absolutely. We pass on the gift.
Yeah. So if you would like to talk to us, we would be so happy to talk to you. If you had button pushing happening over the holidays, this would be a prime time, because they're fresh on your brain about all those other people that were wrong. You might want to have a conversation about it. So the best way to reach me is to go to my website, which is www.theperfectcatch.com. You can sign up for a complimentary conversation with me, scroll down to the middle to the What's Holding You Back from Love questionnaire. Click on that, and there's 10 brief questions that talk about where you are now and where you'd like to be. And then you get access to my online calendar to schedule at your convenience your complimentary conversation. You can also join my mailing list, where you'll get a repeat of this podcast and also information. I have a couple of exciting things that are coming up that I'll be announcing. And then if you scroll to the bottom of my website, there's all my social media icons, and it's Facebook and LinkedIn and Pinterest and Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube. You can also send me a personal email at Christine@theperfectcatch.com. Please tell people how they can reach you, Mr. Selby.
Absolutely. Similar to Christine, I have my own resources as well. So you go to my website, which is barryselby.com. And on the homepage of my website, there's 3 things I want to point out to you. The top of the screen is a button that takes you to a discovery session with me, similar to what Christine has, which also has a questionnaire and then a calendar access. You can get on my calendar. We can have a conversation about where you are and what you want to look for, if I can help you and everything like that. At the bottom of the screen is my email list opt-in. We can just jump right into my email list. And like Christine, I got some big stuff coming this year. So definitely want to get on my email list to find out what's coming in between these conversations on the podcast. And in the middle of the screen, there's a button to my quiz, and I've got another thing I want to talk about after that. But my main quiz, which is the relationship readiness assessment, is basically a evaluation of where you are, what you're looking for in a relationship, what you're planning for, and what may be in the way of that. So the button in the middle of the screen goes for that. You can also go directly to it, go to barryselby.com/quiz, and that will give you access to it as well. And I'll give you some a summary score at the end and some results and guidance. But I also want to tell you about another quiz I just about to launch. It's pre-launch now. If you want to test it out, you can, which is a self-relationship assessment. This is actually a different quiz than I had before. This one's deeper and actually has a PDF and everything with it. So worth checking it out. This one is actually, if you go to barryselby.com/self-quiz, it's not public yet, but you can go to self-quiz. That will give you access to this quiz, which is a 7-area self-assessment of what works, what doesn't work in your life. And if you take this quiz, it'll give you some results, and it'll give you a whole bunch of information and guidance, which will give you some good steps to go forward. So definitely recommend you check out the self-quiz as well. Social media, you can find me all over social media. It's my name, Barry Selby, on YouTube, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. The Instagram is The Real Barry Selby, and also Threads is The Real Barry Selby. Blue Sky is Barry Selby, and all the other places too. And you also send me an email at barry@barryselby.com. In fact, if you want to get the quiz and you've got the link, just email me at barry@barryselby.com and I'll send it back to you. I think that's everything.
And your book.
Oh, yes.
Thank you. Review.
Yes. Reminding me. Yes, I have a best-selling book that's been out for 11, 12 years now. And if you go to the book page, which is barryselby.com/book, or you find it through the navigation on my website, at the top of the screen is a little playback, an audio track, which I would recommend you listen to, which is a AI-generated assessment of my book, an audio track, and it's pretty good. I was actually very impressed with it. So, and it is AI, so there are a couple of glitches in it, but it's like a 10, 12-minute review of my book by 2 AI voices, and they sound really good. So check it out. Go to barryselby.com/book, check out the audio review of my book, and if you like it, get a copy. Thank you.
There you go. So you can always watch us live here on StreamYard on Thursdays, every Thursday at 1 o'clock Pacific and 4 o'clock Eastern, and all the times in between. You can also watch us on Roku and Apple TV, and then you can take us with you, huh, Barry?
Absolutely, because this not only is a video, it's also an audio. So we have a podcast, which is available through Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, the usual platforms, which are great with audio because you can take it with you wherever you go. Whereas with video, you got to stop and watch it. So good news with audio, you can be mobile and take it with you. So definitely listen to us, watch us. By the way, our live stream goes out from StreamYard, goes out to Facebook and YouTube, so you can watch us there as well. So we're everywhere. You can find us wherever you go.
Everywhere. We're everywhere. And we love it when you make comments or share us with people that you know that are having challenges in their relationship lives, in their personal lives. And then we also would love you to like us and give us stars. I've learned that we can get stars now, and review us. And we would be so happy if you want to come and watch us live. We'll be back again next week.
Absolutely. We'll see you then.
Bye for now.
Take care.